Today, we are going to explore the fascinating world of Shakespeare's theatre and his audience. When we study Shakespeare, we often focus only on his plays, but to truly understand his genius, we must also understand where these plays were performed and who came to watch them. Shakespeare wrote not just for reading, but for a lively, diverse audience in a unique theatrical environment. In this video, we will look at the structure of Elizabethan theatres, the kinds of people who attended the plays, and how these factors shaped Shakespeare's writing and dramatic techniques. Now let us begin with a clear understanding of what we mean by Shakespearean theatre. Shakespearean theatre refers to the entire theatrical world during the time of William Shakespeare. This includes not just the plays themselves, but everything connected to how those plays were performed and experienced. First, it includes theatre architecture. This means the physical structure of the playhouses, how the stage was built, where the audience stood or sat, and how the overall space looked. These theatres were very different from modern theatres, and their design directly influenced how plays were written and performed. Second, it includes acting conventions. Actors in Shakespeare's time followed certain styles of performance. For example, there were no actresses, so male actors played female roles. Acting was more expressive and vocal because there were no microphones or modern lighting. Third, it involves audience behavior. Unlike today's quiet audiences, people in Shakespeare's theatre were very active. They reacted loudly, clapped, shouted, and even commented during the performance. This made theatre a lively and interactive experience. Fourth, it includes the social composition of viewers. The audience was very diverse. It included both rich and poor people, from nobles to common workers. This mixture influenced Shakespeare to write plays that could appeal to everyone. Finally, it includes stage techniques. There were no advanced technologies like sound systems or special effects. Instead, Shakespeare used language, imagination, and simple props to create powerful scenes. Now let us understand the physical structure of Shakespearean theatres, which played a very important role in shaping how the plays were performed. First, the most important feature is the thrust stage. This stage extended out into the audience, almost like a platform surrounded on three sides by spectators. Because of this design, actors were very close to the audience, which made performances more direct, engaging, and interactive. Next, we have the yard, also called the pit. This was the open area in front of the stage where common people, often referred to as groundlings, stood to watch the play. They paid the least amount, and they were usually very energetic, sometimes even noisy, reacting immediately to what was happening on stage. Above the yard were the galleries. These were tiered seating areas where the wealthier audience members sat. The higher the gallery, the better the social status. This shows how theatre reflected the social hierarchy of the time. Another interesting feature is the heavens. This was a roof-like structure above the stage, often decorated with paintings of the sky, stars, and other celestial images. It was used for special effects, such as lowering actors playing gods or symbolic characters. Then we have trapdoors. These were built into the stage floor and allowed characters, especially ghosts or supernatural figures, to appear and disappear suddenly. This added a dramatic and magical effect to the performance. Finally, an important and often unknown fact is that there were no curtains in Shakespearean theatre. Scene changes did not happen through visual shifts like today. Instead, they were indicated through dialogue. The actors' words guided the audience to imagine changes in place and time. So, the entire structure of the theatre encouraged imagination, interaction, and a strong connection between actors and audience, which is a key feature of Shakespeare's dramatic style. To understand Shakespearean theatre more deeply, it is important to look at the development of the major theatres of that period. The growth of these theatres shows how drama became one of the most powerful forms of entertainment in Elizabethan England. The first important theatre was the theatre, built in 1576 by James Burbage. This was the first purpose-built public playhouse in England. Before this, plays were usually performed in inn-yards or temporary spaces. The construction of the theatre marked the beginning of professional commercial drama in London. It created a permanent home for stage performances and changed English theatre history. Soon after that, in 1577, the Curtain was built near the theatre in the same district of London. It became another popular performance space and was used by several acting companies. Some scholars believe that a few of Shakespeare's early plays may have been performed there before the construction of the Globe. The next major theatre was the Rose, built in 1587 by Philip Henslowe. The Rose became known for staging many successful plays and helped increase competition among theatre companies. It showed that theatre was becoming a profitable business as well as an artistic form. The most famous theatre of all was the Globe, built in 1599. This theatre has a special story. It was constructed using timber taken from the theatre after a lease dispute over the land where the original building stood. Shakespeare's company transported the wooden materials across the River Thames and used them to build the new theatre. The Globe became closely associated with Shakespeare because many of his greatest plays were performed there. It later became a symbol of Shakespearean drama itself. An interesting point to remember is that the history of these theatres shows that Shakespeare was not simply writing literature. He was part of a rapidly growing theatrical industry that was transforming entertainment in England. Now let us look at where these theatres were actually located, which is a very important aspect of understanding Shakespearean theatre. Most of the theatres during Shakespeare's time were built outside the official city limits of London. This was not accidental. It was a deliberate decision. The main reason for this was to avoid strict laws. The city authorities of London had strong regulations and often viewed theatres as places of disorder, crime, and moral corruption. By building theatres outside the city boundaries, theatre owners could avoid many of these legal restrictions. Another important reason was to escape Puritan control. The Puritans were a religious group who strongly opposed theatre. They believed that plays encouraged immoral behavior and distracted people from religious duties. Because of their influence within the city, theatres were not welcomed inside London. So, theatre companies moved to areas just outside the city, where these strict rules did not fully apply. These areas were known as liberties. Liberties were special zones where various forms of entertainment were allowed, including theatres, bear-baiting arenas, and other public amusements. This keyword, liberties, is very important for exams. It refers to these entertainment districts that existed beyond the direct control of city authorities. So, the location of theatres was not just geographical. It reflects the social and political tensions of the time, especially the conflict between artistic expression and religious or moral control. Major theatres of the time, detailed script. Now let us focus on some of the major theatres of Shakespeare's time, which played a central role in the development of English drama. First, the most famous is the Globe Theatre. The Globe Theatre was built in 1599 by Shakespeare's own acting company, known as the Lord Chamberlain's Men. This theatre had an open-air, circular structure, which means there was no roof over the central yard. Performances took place in daylight, usually in the afternoon. It could hold around 3,000 spectators, making it one of the largest theatres of its time. Many of Shakespeare's greatest plays, such as tragedies and comedies, were performed here, making it closely associated with his name. Next, we have the Rose Theatre. The Rose Theatre was built earlier, in 1587, and became well known for staging many popular plays. It was managed by Philip Henslowe and was one of the first successful theatres before the Globe gained prominence. The Rose played an important role in attracting large audiences and developing the popularity of public theatre. Finally, there is the Swan Theatre. The Swan Theatre is especially famous not just as a performance space, but because of a detailed sketch made by a visitor named Johannes de Witt. This drawing is extremely important for historians because it gives us one of the clearest visual ideas of how Elizabethan theatres actually looked. So, these theatres were not just buildings, they were cultural centres where drama, entertainment, and social interaction came together. Understanding them helps us see how Shakespeare's plays were shaped by the spaces in which they were performed. Now let us understand an important idea. Shakespearean theatre was not just about watching a play. It was a complete entertainment centre. When people went to the theatre in the time of William Shakespeare, they were not entering a quiet, serious space like modern theatres. Instead, they were entering a lively and crowded environment full of activity. First, there was food. People would eat while watching the performance. Vendors sold snacks like nuts, fruits, and drinks. This made the theatre feel more like a public fair than a formal cultural event. Second, gambling was also common. Many people came not only to watch the play, but also to take part in small bets and games happening around the theatre area. This added to the excitement and noise of the place. Third, the theatre was an important social gathering space. People from different social classes came together here. Friends met, conversations happened, and it became a place to see and be seen. For many, going to the theatre was as much about social interaction as it was about the play itself. So, the key idea to remember is this: theatre during Shakespeare's time functioned as a mass entertainment centre. It combined drama, food, social life, and other activities into one lively experience. This explains why Shakespeare's plays are full of action, humour, and direct engagement. They were designed to capture the attention of a busy and easily distracted audience. Now let us move to one of the most important aspects of Shakespearean theatre, the system under which plays were performed. This is a very important topic for exams, so pay close attention. First, we have the repertory system, which is extremely important and frequently asked in exams. In this system, acting companies performed multiple plays in rotation instead of focusing on just one play for a long time. This means that on different days, the same company would perform different plays. Because of this, the same actors had to play different roles in different plays. For example, an actor might play a king in one play and a comic servant in another. This required great flexibility and skill. Now, why is this system important? It explains two key things. First, there was very limited rehearsal time. Actors did not have the luxury to practice one play for weeks. Second, costumes and props were reused across different plays, which made the process more practical and economical. So, the key exam keyword to remember here is repertory theatre system. This term clearly explains how the entire performance structure worked. Next, we have the cue script system, which is a rare but very impressive point to mention in answers. In this system, actors did not receive the full script of the play. Instead, they were only given their own lines along with a few cue words that indicated when they had to speak. This means actors did not always know the complete story of the play. Now, think about the impact of this. First, it required a very strong memory because actors had to remember their lines perfectly with minimal context. Second, their understanding of the full plot was limited, which made timing and coordination even more challenging. So, if you mention this point in an exam, it can make your answer stand out because it is less commonly discussed but highly insightful. Together, these systems show us how fast-paced, demanding, and skill-intensive Shakespearean theatre really was. Now let us examine an interesting contrast in Shakespearean theatre, the difference between scenery and costume. First, it is important to understand that there was no realistic scenery on stage. Unlike modern theatres, there were no detailed sets, painted backgrounds, or scene changes. The stage was quite simple and mostly empty. The audience had to imagine the location through the words spoken by the actors. However, in strong contrast to this simplicity, costumes were very rich and elaborate. Actors wore expensive, colorful, and highly decorative clothes. These costumes were often made from fine materials like silk and velvet, which immediately attracted the audience's attention. Another important point is that actors usually wore contemporary Elizabethan dress rather than historically accurate clothing. Even if the play was set in ancient Rome or medieval times, the actors would still appear in the fashion of Elizabethan era. Historical accuracy was not the priority, visual impact and richness were. So, the key exam insight here is very important. The visual richness of Shakespearean theatre came from costumes, not from scenery. Since the stage itself was simple, costumes played a major role in creating spectacle and maintaining audience interest. This contrast also shows how Shakespeare relied on language and imagination for setting, while using costume to provide visual appeal. Now let us move to a very important topic under textual studies. This is frequently asked in exams, so it is essential to understand it clearly. First, we look at the types of Shakespearean texts. There were mainly two forms in which his plays were published. The first type is the quarto editions, often referred to as Q. These were smaller, cheaper versions of the plays. However, they were not always accurate. Sometimes they were based on actors' memories or unauthorized copies, which means they could contain errors, missing lines, or variations in dialogue. The second and more important type is the folio edition, especially the first folio, published in 1623 after Shakespeare's death. This edition is considered more authoritative and reliable because it was compiled by his fellow actors, who had direct knowledge of the original plays. Many of Shakespeare's works have survived only because they were included in this folio. So, the key exam concept here is textual variation and authenticity. Different versions of the same play may exist, and scholars study these differences to understand which version is closer to Shakespeare's original intention. Now, let us move to the role of improvisation in Shakespearean theatre. Actors did not always follow the script exactly. Sometimes, they added their own lines, especially jokes, or extended comic scenes to entertain the audience more effectively. This was particularly common among clown characters, who had more freedom to interact with the audience and improvise. These moments made performances more lively and unpredictable. So, an important point to remember is that Shakespearean theatre was not rigid or fixed. It was flexible and dynamic, allowing actors to adapt and respond to the audience in real time. This combination of textual variation and improvisation shows that Shakespeare's plays were living performances, not just fixed written texts. Now let us move to another important idea, the moral function of theatre. Shakespearean theatre was not just meant for entertainment. Along with amusement, it also had a deeper purpose. It aimed to provide moral instruction and reflect human behavior. Through his plays, William Shakespeare presented human flaws such as ambition, jealousy, greed, and pride. By watching these characters, the audience could learn important lessons about life and human nature. This idea is closely connected to Renaissance humanism, which focused on human values, human experiences, and self-understanding. Shakespeare's plays encouraged people to think about their own actions and moral choices. A very important exam line to remember here is, theatre teaches through pleasure. This idea comes from the classical principle of Horace, who believed that literature should both delight and instruct. Shakespeare's plays perfectly follow this idea. They entertain the audience while also teaching important moral lessons. Now let us move to memory and oral culture, which is equally important. During Shakespeare's time, there were no recordings, no printed copies available for everyone, and no digital media. So, audiences relied heavily on memory. People remembered famous lines, powerful speeches, and striking dialogues from the plays. Because of this strong memory culture, repetition became an important feature in Shakespeare's writing. Key ideas, emotions, and themes were often repeated in different ways so that the audience could easily remember and understand them. So, this point is very important for analysis. It helps us understand why Shakespeare's dialogues sometimes repeat ideas or phrases. It was designed to suit an audience that depended on listening and remembering, not reading. Together, these points show that Shakespearean theatre was both educational and memorable, shaping not only entertainment but also thought and cultural memory. Now let us move to a slightly advanced but very important topic, indoor versus outdoor theatres. First, outdoor theatres. The best example is the Globe Theatre. These theatres were open air, which means there was no roof over the central area. Performances took place during the daytime using natural light. These theatres were larger and could accommodate a wide range of audiences, including common people. Now, let us look at indoor theatres. A key example is Blackfriars Theatre. These theatres were enclosed spaces and used artificial lighting, mainly candles. Because of this, Performances could take place in the evening as well. Indoor theatres were quite different in terms of audience and experience. They attracted a more elite and wealthy audience, and ticket prices were higher. The environment was more controlled, refined, and sophisticated compared to the noisy and crowded outdoor theatres. So, the key exam insight here is that there was a shift towards sophistication with the development of indoor theatres. This shows how theatre evolved over time to cater to different social groups. Now, let us move to music in theatre. Music played an important role in Shakespearean performances. Songs and musical instruments were frequently used during plays. These were not just for entertainment, but also to create mood and atmosphere. For example, songs could make a scene more emotional, joyful, or even mysterious. Music helped the audience connect more deeply with what was happening on stage. Songs were used in both comedies and tragedies. In comedies, they often added humor and lightness, while in tragedies, they could deepen the emotional impact. This is an often ignored point, but it is very important for exams, especially in higher-level tests. Mentioning the use of music can make your answer more complete and impressive. So, together, these points show how Shakespearean theatre was not only visually engaging but also rich in sound and atmosphere, especially as it developed over time. Now let us look at three important aspects that shaped Shakespearean theatre: stage combat, earlier traditions, and audience expectations. First, duels and stage combat. Sword fights were a common and exciting feature in many plays. These fights were not random. They were carefully choreographed to look realistic while still being safe for the actors. They added action and intensity to the performance and kept the audience fully engaged. A famous example is the final duel in Hamlet, written by William Shakespeare, where the dramatic tension reaches its peak through combat. Next, let us consider the influence of earlier traditions. Shakespeare did not create his plays in isolation. He was influenced by both medieval and classical traditions. From medieval theatre, he borrowed elements from morality plays and mystery plays. These earlier forms focused on moral lessons and religious stories, which influenced the ethical and symbolic aspects of his work. From classical traditions, especially the works of Senecan tragedy, he adopted themes like revenge, violence, and intense emotional conflict. Seneca's influence can be seen in the dramatic structure and serious tone of many tragedies. So, an important idea to remember is that Shakespeare's drama is a blend of traditions. He combined medieval and classical elements to create something new and powerful. Finally, let us look at audience expectations, which is a psychological aspect. The audience in Shakespeare's time expected a variety of experiences. They wanted action, humor, emotion, and spectacle, all in one performance. They did not prefer a single tone throughout the play. Because of this, Shakespeare adapted his writing style. He mixed different genres, combining serious and comic elements within the same play. This is why we often see tragic moments followed by comic relief. So, the key point is that Shakespeare wrote according to what the audience expected. His ability to blend different elements made his plays more engaging and appealing to a wide range of people.